Hello and welcome, peering soul, to the fourth entry of my digital sketchbook series. The last two entries have been about the post-apocalyptic world of Stains of Sin, but this entry, as I mentioned at the end of the previous video, will detail a separate world and the lengthy history behind it. Like OGRPG, this world is a revamp of an old project of mine, which I created when I was around 10. And in fact, the version which I will be discussing is the second iteration of this project. Everything around the first revamp will of course be discussed, but first and foremost, we must go over what this original project was and how its legacy lives on even in the current and vastly different revamp version. This project was never given a gripping name when first created. Most of my old works were the same in that way, instead giving it a bland title such as Fantasy Journey at a later date. The premise was that four adventurer pals, simply referred to as Red, Brown, Yellow, and Blue, embark on a long journey to lands far and perilous to defeat some dark sovereign who is invading their world. But they never made it, as I lost steam for the journey at about what I would say was the halfway point. The way I depicted their journey was that each major location had its own page, and the adventurers would start on the left-hand side and work their way to the exit on the right-hand side, setting up camp to mark the days past and encountering all manner of beasts, outlaws, and weird monsters along the way. The names given to each locale were added much later, which I intended to do upon first making it, but never got around to it. From rocky forests abundant in trolls, snaking dunes besieged by mechanical striders, crystal caves which act as the dens of goblins and black drakes, and whose bowels hold a town under attack by shadowy zombies. Winding highlands with the remnants of a past civilization. A deep lake hiding monstrous serpents. Cloud-veiled cliff faces cradling three prospering towns. A massive jagged mountain shaped like a dragon's head. The infernal cavern within the mountain's gullet, imprisoning a great spectral drake. And a large vessel manned by undead pirates and their cursed captain. The locales these adventurers pass through are varied and emblematic of my tastes in a fantasy journey. At some point after losing steam for it, I decided to draw all of the animals, characters, and monsters the adventurers encounter on their journey, as leaving them as simple dots or vague shapes just wouldn't cut it. As you can see, there are quite a lot of them, and like with the locale names, the names given to them I added at a much later date, as it sort of helps me remember what they were supposed to be. Many of these creatures I still really like, and I feel only belong to Fantasy Journey, as they are part of what characterizes this world from the rest in my catalog. But now that the legacy has been given its spotlight, it is time to move on to its revamp, its evolution into something bigger, but one that ultimately couldn't handle its own weight. This revamp was quite an ambitious one. Given the time I decided to tackle it, which was relatively soon into my delve into digital art. Replacing the old title Fantasy Journey was what I did first, now calling it Eastward. The name coming from the evolution of the project's format of moving left to right into the remade adventurers trekking east to destroy the Dark Invader, which the originals were supposed to face. The new adventurers kept the same color names for simplicity and as a homage to the legacy. But in this, they were given their own personalities and abilities, which made them more interesting. Red was the youngest and had a very chipper, energetic personality, rushing into every situation with a smile on his face, which, more often than not, got him into some trouble. I reflected this, along with his unrefined flame powers, into his design, being worn, simple, and covered in scars. As you can tell, the style I drew him and the rest of Eastward in is pretty different to how I draw now, simply because I was still new to digital art, and especially full-color drawings, as before I did nothing but achromatic art. Due to that, these drawings are too clean and sort of plastic looking, which became an issue for me later on, as you'll see. Brown was the oldest and most experienced, being a veteran knight who acted as both the muscle and father of the party. His patience and wisdom resolving early conflicts as his younger companions struggled to find even ground amongst each other. He didn't have any magic powers, as his strength and simple yet effective techniques were enough. Yellow was an interesting one, as she was an unbeaten swordswoman who despised the idea of working with others on this immense journey, believing they would slow her down. She's the fastest, with blink and you'll miss it swordsmanship and graceful dance-like movements. She was also quite vain and impatient, not respecting her companions and distancing herself from them any chance she could. But after some story stuff, she learns to abandon this arrogance of hers and becomes the caring, virtuous person she was meant to be. Blue is the brains of the party, having the most knowledge of what lies in the east and boasting the strongest magic of the four, which he uses in smart, crafty ways along the journey. While he may look like a narcissist, in truth he's more cold than anything, and in the beginning underestimates Red and demotes him as the party's mule and distraction, passing him off and ignoring his useful observations. It is only after seeing Red in action during a battle that he has a change of heart, and learns from his mistakes and comes to value Red, treating him less like a replaceable helper and more as a younger brother. These sorts of character dynamics were the biggest appeal for Eastward, and I was looking forward to depicting that in scene drawings as they're on their journey. And so, I went to it. But, while it's nice looking back on them, this revamp was destined for abandonment, just like with the original. It just didn't have that refinement which I needed in order for it to get far. Most obvious with the environment and creature designs, which were way too subdued. That is what caused me to lose steam early on. This limitation I placed upon myself for an unknown reason, making what was meant to be a wild, high dark fantasy world into a watered down shadow. This, combined with the lack of what I call cosmic cohesion, was what also caused OG RPG to fall. And I could feel my inner passion for monster design screaming to be released, but I refused to let it. It was only until after I at last created an unrestricted monster, the Endless Appetite, encountered at the end of the first chapter, that my passion broke. It was the realization that I would have to hold back, again, for an agonizing amount of time before I could draw another aberration like it. That was when I abandoned it, leaving it as but another failed revamp to sit unseen in my folders for as long as I made art. However, after several months, I had a dream. A dream of a game set in a high fantasy world where the player character wields a variety of crazy weapons and slays giant, bizarre monsters to take back their home, saving towns, defending forts, and severing the limbs and heads of beasts which stand in their way. Waking, I was instantly entranced with this dream world, and I dedicated an entire day in fleshing out what this game could be. Once it was done, I knew I had something special in the works, and after pondering over its details, I made the decision in making this new world the successor to both Eastward and OGRPG, taking the best of both worlds and going further beyond without needless limitations. Welcome, Peering Soul, to the second of my choice projects to develop once all of my sketchbook entries have been covered. Dawnward, a true grand fantasy adventure of my dreams, which stayed as but a wispy, unrefined concept until now. Let us begin somewhere simple, with a handful of environment-type rough sketches to get a feel for the overarching style of Dawnward. A scene drawing of a lone person sitting on a cliff's edge overlooking a coastal mountainous area. Peaceful, yet sort of melancholic. Humanity and Dawnward's world are in a rough spot, for the grand kingdoms which they once held are long gone, abandoned and ruined after the war against Midnight almost 1,000 years ago. Large towns are the extent of civilization sizes worldwide, and in recent years, the frequency of monster encroachments and presence of destructive, deity-like beings has risen at an alarming rate, threatening societies in all lands with extinction. The warriors of old are gone, and those who kept the legacy of the four heroes who crushed Midnight alive have dwindled into mere legends. As the oldest village folk would say, Midnight has long been slain, freeing man of that sovereign's touch, but its corpse has lingered atop us still. Our promised dawn has yet to rise, and the twilight which precedes it has remained for so many agonizing centuries. Heroes of old, how much longer until the sun shines upon this shadowed realm? The scene's environment is the starting location for the player character, which will be a very chilly, Alaska-like set of islands with big mountains, expansive tundra, and dramatic rocky coasts. Moving on to a quick topic, here are two resources that the player character can collect on their journey, both found early on in the region sketched before: the Spiral Shore Gem and the Milky Crystal, both of which are used for mystic-centered upgrades. The spiral is a huge reoccurring symbol in Dawnward, and is found in a lot of designs for both environments and characters, signifying its importance in the lore, so be on the lookout. Detouring to some more video gaming concepts, these are three icons for combat mechanics taken directly from the dream Dawnward was based off of. The monster hunter-like breaking and severing of limbs was an absolute necessity, and since Dawnward is very much an adult world, the player character can either cut off or break parts of an enemy's body to get special loot, such as limbs, their heads, their armor, etc. Severing parts obviously is done with cut-type damage, and breaking parts with blunt-type damage. On the far right is the execution icon, which appears either when an enemy's execution gauge has filled up, or once a major boss's health has been drained. These executions are gory and brutal, matching the player character's rage and making full use of each of the weapons wielded. Concluding the miscellaneous sketches, here is a smooth, dark stone poking out of the earth with branching, lightning-like scars revolving around a hole on the rock's face. In the very beginning, the player character is defenseless, but after some narrative and brief basic tutorial stuff, they find themselves upon this stone, and poking just a bit out of the hole is what appears to be a rod made of bundled stones. Pulling it out, they see that it is not some mere rare ore-esque resource, but an artifact unlike any other. A relic of a long past age which, when honed, will be the key to fighting back against the rising darkness. The Sword of Rock, a weapon made of jagged muted purple stone that, while heavy for a mainly one-handed sword and worn from centuries of lying in the earth, is sharp enough to cleave through tough hides and ore with ease. This, while an unconventional weapon, is perfect for the player character's campaign and taking out their rage on the evils which now threaten their home. Additionally, the realm the Sword of Rock, and by extension the player character begins in, is called North Crown, a coastal set of regions comprising rocky tundra islands, foggy mountain ranges, and craggy sea spires swallowed in an endless storm. In Dawnward, the player character has access to 4 ancient weapons that they can freely cycle through mid-combat, having their own array of unique abilities, environment interactions, and synergies between each other, which the player will need to master in order to exploit their foes' weaknesses. These weapons, additionally, are homages to the 4 adventurers of Fantasy Journey, though brown has been replaced with a light pink, as that is a more popping color choice to me. The Sword of Rock is special compared to the 3 others, in that it goes through a couple visual and ability upgrades as the player progresses the story, with the first triggering during the confrontation with the last boss of the first chapter. Raising the Sword of Rock to the sky, it is then struck by a bolt of pink lightning, shedding off much of the crusted old stone and uncovering a more refined, yet still rock-formed, sword with swirling patterns across it. It is now the Thunderstone Blade, unlocking the weapon's signature pink rain and lightning powers, which are vital in defeating Chapter 1's final boss, and will remain as this version for some time as the player character ventures off to collect the rest of the ancient weapons. Once all 4 have been acquired, and during a pivotal story moment, the Thunderstone Blade's true power, sealed away for almost 1,000 years, is released, shattering the rock casing and at last revealing the first of the 4 weapons' true form, Rainstorm. Now that it is unchained, Rainstorm has access to its full power, allowing the player to strike with high speeds and summon the unrestrained might of lightning. I love the way its colors turned out, and the way it visually changes throughout the beginning saga from a jagged hunk of rock to an elegant, vibrant sword of legend is satisfying, and I hope I conveyed that evolution well with its variants. Moving on to the rest of the 4, let's start with the Radiant Greatsword Lightbringer, whose blade is entirely formed from holy magic, and deals only pure mystical damage unlike the rest of the 4, which primarily deal physical damage. It's the second slowest, but there is not a waste of energy with its movements, with each strike having a flow which leans well into its proficiency with sweeping, wide-range Since it is a permanent, powerful holy armament, it is essential against undead, spectral, and cursed enemies, with it in fact being found in the realm of East Shield, which was a sacred mountainous land of angel worship now overtaken by the dead. Before acquiring it, the player will definitely struggle against the dark undead they will face, but once earning Lightbringer, the satisfaction of cleaving through what at once was an unstoppable force will surely be felt. Here we shift over to the heaviest, but physically strongest, of the 4 weapons. The brutal, blood-crusted warhammer, Ulshen. Its name is an old variant of revenge or vengeance, which fits perfectly with what this weapon is all about. Also, Ulshen is the exact weapon which the character in the dream Dawnward was based off of was using against a massive humanoid fly monster. Its gimmick is that the less health the player has, the stronger it becomes, and if they are hit enough times, its heavy attacks create bursts of what is called ire after each smash, which, if you played Monster Hunter, looks sort of similar to the dragon element. When Ulshen is shrouded in ire, after killing an enemy, the player will regain some health. It's a weapon which rewards aggression, excelling at pulverizing creatures and breaking super tough body parts which the other weapons would struggle against. The realm it is found in is South Heart, which is an expanse of winding rivers and marshes, flooded ravines, and dense swamps overtaken by monstrous insects. Last but not least, we have here the ornate and regal Azure Wind Spear. Being a very swift, fluid, and twirl-heavy weapon, it can summon enchanted bluish wind to pull in or blow away enemies. Attacking with this weapon looks like a dance, and the more they move and dash about, the stronger the spear's wind power becomes, turning from a gentle breeze into a swirling gale. It is quite the stamina-heavy weapon, but those who take the time to learn its rhythm and how to position its winds will be rewarded with an unending dance of blades and vortexes. Additionally, I imagine it having a fun environmental interaction with fire, where after an input, the player swirls wind around it before blowing it at enemies, the wind's magic enchanting the fire into hot purple flames. The Azure Wind Spear can be found in the realm of West Sword, which has been robbed of its nurturing winds, transforming it into a barren, dry expanse of badlands. Stagnant rivers turn mud ponds, and tall pointed mountains thin of air. The quest to retrieve the rest of the 4 is a long and arduous one, but necessary in beginning the true journey. One that will take the player character and their companions south across the main continent to fight back against the encroaching darkness and uncover the secrets of the ancient ages. But now that has been covered, let's turn over to a shallow dive into the diverse roster of monsters encountered in just the first realm alone. Starting off with the first enemy encountered right after getting the Sword of Rock, the Fishmen. These humanoid fish creatures, along with their many variants, are found along the rocky coasts and great rivers of North Crown, with the standard version being a common menace to the realm's people. As one can expect, fishmen have simple, predictable movesets meant to introduce the player to the basics of combat, such as dodging, guarding, stunning, warrior's focus, body parts, executions, etc. They only become a true danger when in groups, which they tend to gather in, and can also dive into bodies of water and toss stones at the player from afar. For more in-depth movesets, body part toughness, loot, executions, and other miscellaneous information for fishmen, as well as the rest of the monsters shown here, That will be covered in their own videos. Soon after battling the first fishman encounter, the player will face against what are called fish children in tandem with some fishmen, with them obviously being the adolescent version of the previous enemy. Their walking ability is poor at this stage, but they are still adept swimmers, zipping through channels and pools and leaping out of the water to deliver a nasty bite to the player before retreating back under the cold tides. While they're smaller and easier to kill when dragged onto land, they are certainly more aggressive and can quickly become menaces if left alive. Also encountered in the sort of combat tutorial are these bigger variants called algal fishmen, which are covered in soppy, hair-like algae that, along with their stonish scales, help blend in under tide pools. Much more sluggish, but having higher health, defenses, and an especially strong jaw, capable of sucking in air to shallowly pull in the player to bite down on their head in an attempt to swallow them alive. The first algal fishman fought causes a sort of short sequence where the player character remembers a sword technique the village guardsman taught them once, then unlocking the first skill called the cross slash, which the player is scripted to use to kill the fishman. At a later point after the combat tutorial, when the player character has now gotten the support of their village and is set on finding the source of the emerging whale threat, they encounter another type of fishman, the bronze fishman. These are the fastest swimmers of the bunch and adept at long-range combat. Their throat sac capable of storing water, which they pressurize and spit at high speeds. They are not called bronze just for their similar coloration, but also because their scales are metallic, and some specimens which have lived long enough will have some oxidized scales too. While they are uncontested in the water, on land they are no more graceful than a common fishman. While the fishmen shown thus far reside in the Tundra Isles, the next one is found in the misty rivers of the Fog Tongue Mountains, located south of the last region. These freshwater variants are called red fishmen, and are noticeably hardier and move with a hunched quadrupedal gait, having similar group tactics as the common fishmen. While they can't dive into the water, they can slide on their bellies through the rivers they call home, splashing and lunging at the player with their muscular frames. The previous fishmen have been the standard enemy tier, but now let us look at an elite-tiered foe called the Chrome Fishman, a large variant also found in the Fog Tongue Mountains. Their eel-like bodies and smooth chrome scales allow them to slither and whip around at startling speeds, and their movements, in a way, are also elegant. Like the bronze fishmen, Chrome have metallic scales, though theirs are tougher, with the side plating especially along the upper body, capable of repelling almost all cutting attacks. Being an elite foe, which are essentially mini-bosses, Chrome fishmen are much harder to take down, but the rewards for achieving victory are much sweeter than the regular enemy tier. But let's move a tier higher, to what is called a great foe, or a lesser boss, which are often optional, encountered in hidden locales of a region which offer valuable rewards upon defeat. And the first of the great foes covered is the gigantic gold fishman, found in an inconspicuous spot on a tiny, empty island way at the northern tip of the Tundra Isles, which can only be engaged on a rare chance while fishing. While it lacks the developed legs of the other fishmen, instead remaining as fins, its forelimbs are especially pronounced, being large, webbed claws that can pull itself on land and help use its immense weight against the player, which can easily smush them. I can imagine it spitting some Water and blood mix mucus from its prolapsed esophagus at the player, slowing them down as the beast lunges at them with its massive frame. It gets its name from its coloration alone, not possessing the metallic scales of the bronze and chrome variants, though its scales are still tough for it being a deeper ocean dweller. Now that the fishmen have been covered, let's move on to the rest of North Crown's enemies I sketched on this page. Here we have an odd humanoid called a burglar, which roams in groups across the Tundra Isles to steal and collect precious metals and treasures unearthed from the dark storms that pass over the region. They are made of ore, and thus cut type damage isn't ideal, with blunt type being the most effective, especially if the player wishes to break the container held in their torso. As you can see, they can wield one of two weapons, a curved sword or a mace, both of which are made of the same swirling patterned ore their bodies are formed of. While burglars are more of menaces to ruin hunters and traveling blacksmiths, a variant exists which has become a domestic threat. That being the rarer, larger elite foe, the Raider. These ore-formed humanoids target villages to ransack of their goods, sucking in items with their left vacuum-like arm and killing people which get in their way with their ore daggers. These enemies are formidable. Their aggression, cut-resistant body parts, and tendency to be followed by burglars making them high threats to the player as they continue with their campaign in saving their home. I wasn't expecting it to come out so well, but I'm satisfied with its design. And I think the elaborate patterns across its body really make it stand out visually, especially once I give it color later on. A lesser enemy of the Tundra Isles, yet one that is significant to the rising threat the people of this region are facing in recent years, that being the whales. This specifically is a whale nodule, an infant, fragile creature drifted onto the shores of the islands after being shut off by the mysterious Whale Queen, who the player eventually discovers as the source of the whales, and so works with the Tundra Isles people to hatch a plan in order to slay her. I want the whales, while sort of resembling real-world whales, to be monstrous and almost grotesque, with them all having human-like eyes with pronounced lashes, tendril patterning across their hides, and some having thin black hair on their heads and backs. Moving back to the Fog-Tongue Mountains, here is the very first reimagined creature from the original Fantasy Journey, the Flay Eel. This is the creature that had the most variants out of all the legacy ones, with there being a stone one, a sand one, a tar one, a spiky one, etc. Though the standard type only appeared in a single location early on. For Dawnward, I'm keeping just the standard Flay Eel and making it unique to the Fog-Tongue Mountains, as variants for this reimagined creature are unnecessary. Like in the Legacy, the Flay Eel could fly around using some sort of magic, but now it's being done via the vapors it expels from the slits on its neck and chest, allowing it to swim through the air. I imagine this being a magical sight as the player first encounters them slithering through the clouds in between valleys and big clusters. If their chest is hit with strong enough blunt damage, the vapor can forcibly be knocked out of them, grounding and vastly weakening them, making them easy kills. I love how it came out. It is the first out of all reimagined monsters from my original projects, which felt right upon drawing. And I hope to feel that again with the other legacy enemies I'm bringing back. After the Whale Queen has been felled, the player and Tundra Isles people are now faced against the overarching force which has been increasingly destroying the islands themselves. That being whatever is the source behind the dark storms which pass over the region periodically. They come from the northwest, riling up over time, before heading to the Tundra Isles over a massive rock spires jutting out of the sea, eternally shrouded under a shadowy maelstrom. After discovering a relic which can grant safe passage through perilous ocean storms, located in the great caves under the fog-tongued mountains, the player arrives to the final region of Northground, the Domain of Storms. One of the first enemies encountered are the Salt Leeches, which are the second reimagined creatures from Fantasy Journey, staying faithful to the original but given greater detail. These chunky pests are not graceful, but if they get a bite of the player, they will find it nearly impossible to pry them off, with this becoming a major threat when encountering multiple leeches. When colored, you'll see that its teeth are a chalky white, and that is due to them being formed from salt, hence part of where they get their name from. Sticking in the Domain of Storms, here is a bizarre ocean creature called a sea stinger, which latches onto tidal rock faces and waits for prey, thrusting its sharp spine tentacle into their bodies, injecting potent paralytic venom. This venom, additionally, is stored in the two sacs on its back, and if hit with a strong attack, will cause the venom to be squirted out of the spine. It's very much an ambush predator, its sluggishness making it quite easy to kill once the surprise attack is through. Now, those are the refined monster drawings covered, but let's quickly go over two rough sketches of potential foes of Northground. First being an offspring of the Whale Queen, a narwhal, and I of course knew that if I was going to be making a narwhal monster, I had to have a human impaled upon his tusk. Come on. It makes him more interesting, shows the violence of the whales, and opens the door for interesting attacks where it'll smash its man-skewered tusk on the player. Moving on to an even rougher sketch, this is a concept for some kind of hydra-like beast whose body is a bulb and has coiling snakes emerging from its base. I like this idea, though it still needs refinement, and I'm thinking of shifting its location from Northground to South Heart, as I feel it fits the wetlands-focused areas of that realm more. But that is where my exploration into Dawnward ends, and is very much just the tip of the iceberg with what this world offers. Strap in, peering soul, for the monsters of darkness will only get wilder as more of this world is revealed. Well, we at last arrive to the sign-off of this sketchbook entry. This was a long one for sure, but I hope it was an interesting one, and that you look forward to more of what this world has to offer. I know I'm excited for it. The next entries I'm planning on making shorter, but ultimately if I have a lot to say about a world, I have a lot to say. Not much else can be done about it. Dawnward is the most narrative, character-focused, and video gamey of the three choice projects, but that's what gives it its identity, and elevates area discoveries, monster encounters, and lore revelations to a higher degree, making it feel like the grand adventure that it is. While sketches for Dawnward itself were pretty sparse here, I will leave you with a peek into some of the monster designs that will appear later on post-beginning saga. Alright, peering soul, I will see you in the next Stained entry.